of Plymouth Plantation, Book 1, Chapter 3, Settlement at Leyden, 1609 through 1620. Having reached the Netherlands, they saw many fine fortified cities, strongly walled and guarded with troops of armed men, and they heard a strange and uncouth language, and beheld the different manners and customs of the people, with their strange fashions and attire, also far differing from their own plain country villages, wherein they were bred and had lived so long, that it seemed that they had come into a new world. But these were not the things that they gave much attention to. They had other work in hand and another kind of war to wage. For though they saw fair and beautiful cities, flowing with abundance of all sorts of wealth and riches, it was not long before they saw the grim and grisly face of poverty, coming upon them like an armed man, with whom they must buckle and encounter, and from whom they could not fly, but they were armed with faith and patience against him and all his encounters, and though they were sometimes foiled, yet by God's assistance they prevailed and got the victory. When Mr. Robinson, Mr. Brewster, and the other principal members had arrived, they were among the last, having stayed to help the weakest over. Such things were deliberated as were necessary for their settling and for the best ordering of the church affairs. When they had lived at Amsterdam about a year, Mr. Robinson, their pastor, together with the most discerning of the others, seeing that Mr. John Smith and his followers had already fallen out with the church which was there previously, and that nothing could avail to end the quarrel, and also that the flames of contention were likely to break out in the parent church itself, as afterwards, alas, came to pass, they thought it best to move. Therefore, they were in any way involved, though they knew it would be to their worldly disadvantage, both at present and probably in the future, as indeed it proved to be. For these and other reasons, then, they removed to Leiden, a fair and beautiful city, of a sweet situation, made famous by its university, in which recently there had been so many learned men. However, lacking seafaring trades, which Amsterdam enjoys, it was not so favorable in providing means of livelihood. But being settled here, they fell to such trades and employments as they best could, valuing peace and their spiritual comfort above any other riches whatever, and at length they came to raise a competent and comfortable living, though only by dint of hard and continual labor. Thus, after numerous difficulties, they continued many years in good circumstances, enjoying together much sweet and delightful intercourse and spiritual comfort in the ways of God, under the able ministry and prudent government of Mr. Robinson, and from Mr. William Brewster, who before had been his assistant, in place of an elder, to which position he was now called and chosen by the church. So they grew in knowledge and other gifts and graces of the Spirit of God, and lived together in peace and love and holiness. And many came to them from different parts of England, so that there grew up a great congregation. And if any differences arose or offenses broke out, as cannot but be even amongst the best of men, they were always so met with and nipped in the head betimes, that love, peace, and communion continued. Or in some instances the church was purged of those who were incurable and incorrigible, when after much patience used, no other means would serve. Indeed, such was the love and respect that this worthy man, Mr. John Robinson, had to his flock, and his flock to him, that it might be said of them, as it once was of the famous Emperor Marcus Aurelius and the people of Rome, that it was hard to judge whether he was more delighted in having such a people or they in having such a pastor. His love was great towards them, and his care was always bent to their best good, both for soul and body, for, besides his singular ability in divine things, wherein he excelled, he was also very able in directing their civil affairs and foreseeing dangers and troubles. So he was very helpful to their material well-being, and was in every way a common father to them. None offended him more than those who kept apart from the rest and neglected the common good, or those who were rigid in matters of outward order and would inveigh against the evil of others, and yet were remiss themselves and not too careful to maintain virtuous conversation. The congregation, too, ever had a reverent regard for him, and held him in precious estimation, as his worth and wisdom deserved, and highly as they esteemed him whilst he lived and labored amongst them. It was even more so after his death, when they came to feel the want of his help, and saw by woeful experience what a treasure they had lost. But to return, I know not, but it may be spoken to the honor of God, and without prejudice to any, that such was the true piety, the humble zeal, and the fervent love of this people, whilst they lived together towards God in his ways, and the single-heartedness and sincere affection of one towards another, that they came as near the primitive pattern of the first churches as any other church of these later times has done. It is not my purpose to treat of what befell them whilst they lived in the Low Countries, which would require a large treatise of itself, but to show the beginnings of the new Plymouth settlement. But since some of their adversaries, upon their departure from Leyden, of their own free will uttered slanders against them, as if the country had been weary of them and had driven them out, as the heathen historians asserted of Moses and the Israelites when they went out of Egypt, I will mention a particular or two to show the contrary and the good exception they had in the place where they lived. First, though many of them were poor, there were none so poor but that if they were known to be of that congregation, the Dutch, either bakers or others, would trust them to any reasonable extent when they lacked money to buy what they needed. They found by experience how careful they were to keep their word, and saw how diligent they were in their callings, that they would even compete for their custom and employ them in preference to others. Again, about the time of their departure, or little before, the magistrates of the city gave this commendable testimony of them in the public place of justice, in reproof to the Walloons, who were of the French church there. These English, said they, have lived among us these 12 years, and yet we never had any suit or accusation against any of them, but your strifes and quarrels are continual. At this time occurred the great trouble with the Armenians, who molested the whole state, and the city in particular, where the chief university was situated. So there were daily hot disputes in the schools thereabouts, and the students and other learned people were divided in their opinions between two professors of divinity, the one daily teaching in favor of the Armenian faction and the other against it. Things grew to such a pass that few of the followers of the one professor would hear the other teach. But Mr. Robinson, though he preached thrice a week himself and wrote several books, beside his many other duties, went constantly to hear their readings, the one as well as the other. So he became well grounded in their controversy, and saw the force of all their arguments, and knew the shifts of the opponent, and being himself very able, none was fitter to buckle with them than himself, as appeared by various disputes. In fact, he began to be a terror to the Armenians, so that Episcopius, the Arminian professor, put forth his best strength and advanced various theses, which he asserted he would defend against all comers in public dispute. Now Poliander, the other professor and the chief preachers of the city, requested Mr. Robinson to take up his challenge, but he was loth to do so, being a stranger. However, the others importuned him and told him that such was the ability and nimbleness of the opponent, that the truth would suffer it if he did not help them. So he acquiesced and prepared himself accordingly, and when the day came, the Lord so helped him to defend the truth and foil his adversary, that he put him to an apparent nonplus in public audience. And he did the same thing 2 or 3 times upon similar occasions. This, while it made many praise God that the truth had so famous a victory, procured him much honor and respect from those learned men and others who loved the truth. So far from being weary of him and his people, or desiring their absence, had it not been for fear of giving offense to the government of England, they would have conferred upon him some public honor. Indeed, when there was talk of their departure to America, several men of prominence in the country tried to induce them to become naturalized, and even made them large offers to do so. Though I might mention many other similar examples to show the untruth of this slander, they suffice, for it was believed by few and was raised in malice.